All right. It's like a family reunion in here. Could I get everybody to take a seat so we can get started? Good afternoon. Welcome to the 11th annual community reading. Frederick Douglass's What to the Negro is the 4th of July. I am your mayor, those that live in Carrboro, Barbara Foushee. And it's wonderful. I love the love. And it's good to see everyone out. It's hot, so everybody hydrate. Maybe after you leave here, you might go over to Town Commons for some music and more July 4th festivities. This speech is one of Douglass's most powerful as he touches on hypocrisy, the true meaning of the Declaration of Independence, inequality, slavery, and freedom. Until we are all free, y'all. Until we are all free. So can we just let that sink in for a second? Until we are all free. Our readers are super excited to participate. They're all here. Thank you for agreeing to participate this year. I do want to acknowledge my colleagues on the Carrboro Town Council. I'm looking at, I think Mayor Pro Tem Danny Now is here. I saw, can you stand up, Mayor Pro Tem? I thought I saw Council Member Haven O'Donnell. Oh, there she is. Am I missing? Let's see, who else? Am I missing anybody from the council that may have a mask on? I don't think so. Other elected officials. I know we have Judge Pendergrass, he's a reader over here. Anybody else, please stand. Other elected officials. Feaster-Fornville School Board, of course, our illustrious Congresswoman Valerie Foushee, Paris Miller Foushee, Chapel Hill Town Council, Anna Richards, Orange County Board of County Commissioners. Can we get a round of applause for them, for their service to the towns, the county, and the state of North Carolina? I have a couple of my former colleagues here. I see our former Carrboro Town Council member Susan Romaine and our former mayor, Damon Seils, is here. He know I'm gonna say something. Former Carrboro Board of Aldermen member Braxton Foushee, first Black Alderman, town of Carrboro. I feel like I have captured everyone. Last but certainly not least, we thank our town staff for the planning and execution of not only this event, but many events that we enjoy throughout the year. I'm going to shout out Parks and Recreation, our communications and engagement team, always hard at work. That's them, online, on our social media platforms, YouTube. Just do an amazing job. I want to talk about these 4 seats. This is how the readers will come up. You will come up in groups of 4. I feel like I'm missing something, but maybe I'm not. I'll figure it out later. So now I want to introduce Mrs. Danita Mason-Hogans, who will give remarks. Danita Mason-Hogans is an oral historian, a memory worker, and generational native of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She uses oral histories to advocate for informed collaboration and policy change. She works in partnership with veterans of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, local civil rights veterans, and today's activists to center equity when documenting national and local movement history. Her TED Talk provides an explanation of the critical oral history methodology which she helped to adapt at Duke University. Currently, she is a part of a documentary with Al Roker. I was going to say AI. with Al. Y'all help me. With Al Roker and John Deere, entitled "Gaining Ground: The Fight for Black Land." She is the founding director of the James Cates Scholars Collective. And her present advocacy is for a no-cost education program and cost-free college tuition for the descendants of the enslaved laborers at UNC. And before I sit down, I want to acknowledge, she snuck in, but I saw her anyway, District Court Judge Joe Hall Brown. And without further ado, where is she? Where is my speaker? There she is. There she is. Danita, come on up. Danita Mason-Hogans, guys. She gonna tear it up?
How y'all doing? Thank you so much, Mayor, for that beautiful introduction. As somebody who dabbles a little bit in history, it would be a shame for me not to show how truly grateful I am to be here for the first annual reading of what to the slaves is the 4th of July, with our first beautiful Black woman mayor, the Honorable Mayor Barbara Foushee. Thank y'all for celebrating her in this moment. It's also meaningful that this marks the 60th year of the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I hope you had a chance to attend the symposium at the Chapel Hill Public Library on the actual anniversary of the passage of the legislation on Tuesday of this week, which was headed up by James Williams. Who I might add also conceptualized this annual celebration. But it was a wonderful event, and particularly meaningful to me because we often celebrate famous walks or sit-ins and protests, which are important to note, but we don't often recognize the hard labor, the brilliant strategy, and the tenacity of the litigation that goes into bringing these goals and the dreams and the protection of people into fruition, and make them into the policies that we live up under. We were honored to be on the panel with the James Cates Scholars and the women of the movement, and also our legendary warrior, Braxton Foushee, to discuss the hard-fought battles during the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s and the 1960s here in Chapel Hill of the Mighty Tigers at Lincoln High School. The brilliant James Cates Scholars introduced the panel. So this summer's theme for us is the Reconstruction era here in Chapel Hill and what this era has meant for our goals of attaining freedom through the lens of the 13th Amendment, which of course abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which ensured citizenship to everyone born in the U.S., which was created for the formerly enslaved, and the 15th Amendment, which gave Black men the right to vote before the Jim Crow era. On Tuesday, we were almost late to our panel because we were privileged to speak with Dr. Hassan Jeffries, who is the brother of Speaker Hakeem Jeffries and a good friend of mine. Hassan is a master scholar on young people and Black people in building power in Lowndes County, Alabama. And so I asked him to talk with our young scholars because this year, 2024, is also the 60th anniversary of young people who challenged this country to look at itself in the mirror and determine what the definition of living in a democracy truly demands for the rights of all of its citizens. And in the same year that the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, young people who were organizing in Alabama were asking what that might mean in an era which 80% was Black folk and not one registered Black voter. And young people in Mississippi were asking the same thing. I mean, what does this mean in an area where all of the elected officials in an 80% Black population were openly opposed to any rights or representation of their citizens? These were important questions, and young people did what young people do. They did something about it. They informed the tenant farmers and sharecroppers about their rights in the process of voting. They practiced democracy with sample ballots and challenged the Democratic National Convention in 1964 on the rules that they had set for democracy. And when they failed the test in Atlantic City, they created their own party in Lowndes County, Alabama, to go after the democracy that they were promised. This is the power of young people. The movement is on a continuum, and that same spirit was present in the 1940s, when Black men demanded an opportunity to fight against Nazi oppression. And that generation gave birth to the generation of the 60s. And that was the same generation that challenged the Voting Rights Act in 1965, that brought the Voting Rights Act in 1965. So it's important for the scholars to realize that that same spirit of freedom that runs through their veins ran in the generation before them, and the generation before them, and the generation before them. So as young people, it's important for them to understand now, when they have questions of democracy of their own, that they are living in difficult times. And people today can talk about their notions of freedom. They're still here. And it's important to trust young people to ask these questions. And it's important not to obfuscate or make them think that there's something wrong with the questions that they're asking, because that is their job, to hold us accountable. And we should be willing to listen to them and hold up a mirror to ourselves. But young people, it is also an informed discussion that we should be having. We should be having an intergenerational discussion. This whole notion of throwing people away when they reach a certain age is not a good notion. One of my scholars, Isiah, if we were to ask him to run to the store in an hour and challenge him to race against my 81-year-old father, Isiah would probably win, because his legs are stronger and he can run faster. But one thing I know, my daddy would be there when he said he was going to be there. So sometimes our brains are like that. Sometimes our brains slow down a little bit, and it's difficult for us to connect stuff. But when we get there, the wisdom and the advice and the spirit and the energy and all of the things that we can say are worth the wait. So young people interrogate democracy and make it an informed choice. And that's what we do with the young, brilliant James Cate scholars. So yesterday, we got in maybe at about 12:30. We went to the Charleston Museum of African American History, and I wore this shirt, but I actually had a little different banner right here, and it said Chapel Hill Freedom Day is April 17th, 1865. So it had our little thing there when 4,000 troops announced that Black people in this area were free. And I had a very similar shirt going on, and we didn't get back until about 12:30 last night. And I told young people who were with us, I said, okay now, y'all might see Miss Danita wear the same shirt. Mind your business, mind your business. But it's important to wear that shirt and wear that shirt on the day and to reflect on the day that we were free and that we celebrated. I have never felt so American in my life because I come from ancestors who built this place, who nurtured this place, who supported this place. And my children, my James Cade scholars, need to know that they are entitled to a piece of this democracy. And I'm very hopeful, as Frederick Douglass was when he talked about his place with democracy. And the reason that I'm hopeful is because it seems to me that although we're in dark times, people who believe in freedom are more determined than ever to make sure that this is a democracy. So we have a great opportunity right now to interrogate what it really means for democracy and if we're living up to those standards. That trip was made possible with the donations from the Friends of the Quakers and the Chapel Hill Historical Society, as well as St. Thomas More. And so these are predominantly white groups who are investing in young children. And I can always count on the elders, the mighty tigers, and other leaders around who are willing to share stories and history to give context and meaning for these young people. Because whether we like it or not, and I do like it, young people are our future. So in my view, we should interrogate another thing that's overdue, and that is the way we treat Black women in democracy. It is Black women who are bringing us to this moment. It was people like Bonnie Lewis and Letitia James who are willing to hold our president accountable to the laws of this land and who have stood strong and have been recipients of all kinds of vitriol and hate just for doing their job and bringing us our democracy. Black women are the most consistent, most reliable vote in this country and the least well treated. So young people have questions, and I do too. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about our wonderful Congresswoman, Valerie Foushee, who we will be visiting in DC next week with the James Cade Scholars. Let's talk about her and other Black women who are held accountable for different standards and different fundraising, who have been, since Shirley Chisholm, told, just wait a minute, it's not your time yet. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fact that when you run for Congress or Senate, the chances of you being very wealthy are really high unless you're a Black woman. So we need to recommit ourselves to upholding fundraising standards for Black women who run for office because we've already proven what we can bring to democracy. Let's talk about Paris Miller Foushee, who insisted when we were talking about, here's Paris. Paris was on our trip, that's why she has a little hat on today. She came with us to South Carolina, but let's talk about Paris, who demands to bring a historical narrative to every decision she makes when it comes to housing or anything that affects the town, and does not leave history out of the conversation. We need people like that. Let's talk about my Rangewood homegirl, Feaster-Fornville. Where is Vicky? Who would give Miss Fannie Lou Hamer a run for her money when she talked about the importance of thinking and considering this generation of Black children who come from the second largest achievement gap in the nation since the schools were desegregated, and said now it is time to put education over privilege and challenge the comfort that allows this continuation of the school system. So let's talk about Feaster-Fornville. Let's talk about Anna Richards. I met Anna Richards, I think on the first or second day when she came to Chapel Hill, and Anna came ready to serve and has been serving since she has been here. Let's celebrate Anna Richards. And since I saw her come in here with her beautiful face, let's talk about Judge Joel Brown. Let's talk about the way in which she considers a background of anybody that comes in their courtroom and takes history and applies an ethical lens. We need that in our judicial system. And let's talk about the mighty women of the movement who were willing to get arrested again and again and again and again and again to make sure that this place would be free or freer for their children and their children's children, and were willing to put their lives and their bodies on the line, and have never been celebrated as they should. So let's celebrate the women of the civil rights movement. Today, as we reflect on Frederick Douglass, I'm reminded on a quote that he had that I love so much. He said, "I believe no man, however gifted, can voice the wrongs and present the demands of women with the same skill and effect, with the power and authority of a woman herself." Frederick Douglass said that in 1888. So in my view, as we should interrogate the way that we treat Black women in democracy, let me name our beautiful, if I may, chocolate, Black Mayor Barbara Foushee. Barbara Foushee came to this community. Before she was mayor, she was in the neighborhoods. Before she was mayor, she was in these town policy meetings. Before she was mayor, she was studying how inequity exists in Carrboro. And it was because of her commitment, her care, her coming out of her tradition as a Zeta Phi Beta. Let's talk about the care that she has brought to our community. Let's talk about the truth that she brings. Let's stop trying to tone police Black women and tell them how they should come, how they should speak. What we have in our honorable mayor is a leader, and a leader is not always going to tell you what you need to hear, but a leader will be moved by their heart. So once we have the presence of this beautiful Black woman in the room, I have to say, on the first annual reading of the Frederick Douglass today, during her tenure, we need to support her as she has supported our community. We need to accept her leadership with the wisdom and understanding that her time in this community has brought her. And we need to appreciate that her perspective is measured and informed. And most of all, we need to pat ourselves on the back. We have a great town council in Chapel Hill and Carrboro. We have a progressive school board, and we have an opportunity now not to shirk or run away or be afraid of the moment we're in. We need to lay in the cut. We need to plan. We need to organize what it's going to be like when the sun rises on the next day. And we need to be prepared for that moment. And one of the ways that we can prepare for that moment is to study, analyze history, support those in leadership, and come together with a plan and a vision that our young people can be proud of and be armed with as they confront the things that they need to confront in the future. I want to thank you again, Mayor Foushee, and thank you for thinking of me today. You have some good counsel in Brother Braxton Foushee to be able to tell you the history of this town. And when we had to look at jelly beans, if we were Black, and guess the number of jelly beans before we were allowed to vote, we can never, ever forget that history. Thank you, James Cade Scholars, for being willing to understand and listen to your elders, contextualize that history, and have the heart to share it with others. Thank y'all for coming today, and thank you for allowing me to come forth. Y'all have a great, great day, and I can't wait for the reading.
Thank you so much, Danita. Always truthful and always very powerful and timely. To stave off any confusion on my part, I am going to kind of be calling up our groups of readers in fours, because I feel like that's probably the best way for me to do it. To keep everything kind of rolling smoothly. So Foushee, Glover, Hankins, Emilia, and Omar.
Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly more shrinkingly, nor with greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is, to me, a matter of astonishment as well as gratitude. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your mind back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
Fellow citizens, 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and the title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as a home government. England as your fatherland, although a considerable distance from your home, imposed in the exercise of the parental progressiveness upon their colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as in its mature judgment it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers, who had adopted the idea of the infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far as to pronounce the measure of the government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and although such as ought to be quietly submitted to. I sacredly needed to say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers, feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government. Your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in decorous, respectful, loyal manner. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifferences, coldness, and scorn, yet they persevered. Somebody say amen.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restrictive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and the prudent of that day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. The opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all the terror and affrighted vocations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshipers of prosperity, clothed a dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. We seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equivalent. Resolved that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown.
First English, then Spanish. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gain is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history. the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny.
Ciudadanos, vuestros padres cumplieron esa resolución. Lo lograron y hoy cosechan los frutos de su éxito. La libertad obtenida es vuestra y ustedes, por tanto, pueden celebrar adecuadamente este aniversario. El 4 de julio es el primer gran hecho en la historia de vuestra nación. El mismo aro de la cadena de su destino aún no desarrollado.
Pride and patriotism, no less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So, indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles, be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost.
El orgullo y el patriotismo, no menos que la gratitud, les impulsan a celebrarlo y a tenerlo en perpetua memoria. He dicho que la Declaración de Independencia es el aro de la cadena del destino de su nación. Así lo considero yo. Los principios contenidos en este instrumento son principios salvadores. Respeten esos principios. Sean fieles a ellos en todas las ocasiones, en todos los lugares, contra todos los enemigos y a cualquier precio.
Where's DeJesus Lytle, Palmer-Lytle?
Fellow citizens, I'm not wanting in respect for fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory.
They love their country better than their own private interests, and all will concede that is a rare virtue, that ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers have staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out more as we contrast it with these degenerate times.
How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Mark them, fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of the Republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narratives at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to others.
My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and His cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers, unless your children children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolences.
Minister Campbell, Noah DeVrieze, Dr. Parker, and Shawri King-Casey.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principle of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessing resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both for your sake and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pales of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessing in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, and prosperity and independence bequeathed by your father is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you have brought strife and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in a joyful anthem where inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizen, to mock me by asking me to speak today?
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions, whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. to forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason, most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reapproach before God and the world.
My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view. Standing here identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds itself to be false to the future. How prophetic are those words. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity which is outraged, in the name of liberty which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at heart a slaveholder shall not confess to be right and just.
I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of the laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? May our ancestors, all of them, be honored by the reading and the hearing of this word.
Yeah. Anita Jones-McNair, Damon, Seils, Nevaeh, Hodge, Isiah, Allen. Come on up.
Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or to write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea, and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man. It is not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave. We are called upon to prove that we are men.
Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation? Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation? As a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to make myself look ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes? To rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters. Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood, insane with pollution, is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply.
What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine? That God did not establish it? That our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There's blasphemy in the thought that which is inhumane cannot be divine. Who can reason with such propositions? I cannot. The time for such an argument has passed. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing arguments is needed. Or had I the ability and I could reach the nation's ear, I would do today. I would today. Pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule. Excuse me. Blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is indeed needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm. The whirlwind and the earthquake, the feeding of the feeding of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The property of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed, denounced.
Brave young man, he felt that. James Williams, Judge Pendergrass, Kate Finhagen, Feaster-Fornville, Brighton McConnell.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty and unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States. At this very hour, go where you may, search where you will, roam throughout all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world. Search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revealing revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival.
Take the American slave trade, which we are told by the papers is especially prosperous just now, as the price of men was never higher, and which is carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this Confederacy. This trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. In several states, this trade is the chief source of wealth. It is called the internal slave trade, in order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. The foreign slave trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhumane traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and of man. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
Behold the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with pistol, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill.
Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the inhuman wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There, see the old man who, with locks thin and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun. Her briny tears falling on the brow of the baby in her arms. See, too, that girl of 13, weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. He and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly, you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank, and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the baby. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. The gash on her shoulder tells her to move on.
Follow this drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See the men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever. And never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from the scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States.
Carrboro Police Chief ATAC, Hara, Liza Wolff-Francis, Brother Frank Tillman.
I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot in Baltimore. When a sufficient number have been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night. In the deep, still darkness of midnight, I have been often aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the piteous cries of the chain gangs that passed our door.
Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight.
But a still more inhumane, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in the most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States.
The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is hunting ground for men.
Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state enforce, as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God, that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have, within the past 2 years, been hunted down and without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent on them for bread. But of this, no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage and to all the rights of this republic, the rights of God included. For Black men, there is neither law nor justice, humanity nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime, and bribes to the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and $5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any 2 millions is sufficient under this hell-black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary Black man into the remorseful jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witness for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor.
Town Manager Patrice Toney, Betty Curry, Herman M. Foushee, Honoria Mado, Carrboro Fire Chief Will Potter. starting with Town Manager Tony.
Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe and are bound in deciding in the case of a man's liberty to hear only his accusers. In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in a diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation.
Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while you hold political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You hurl your anthems at the crown-headed tyrants of Russia, Australia, and pride yourself on your democratic institution while you yourself consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite your sure fugitives of oppression from abroad, honoring them with banquets, greet them with ovation, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land, you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system as barbarous and dreadful as ever stained the character of a nation, a system begun in avarice, supported in pride and perpetual in cruelty.
You shed tears over fallen Hungary, and you make the sad story of the wrongs of the themes of your poets, statesmen, and orators, to your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against oppressor. But in regards to 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence and will hail him as an enemy of the nation who dares with those wrongs that subject to public discourse. You're all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but as a coal and an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America. You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system in the very essence casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off the 3-penny tax on tea, yet the ring and the hard-earned farthing from the grasp of black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men, but to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another, yet you notoriously hate, parentheses, and glory to your hatred, in the paren, all men whose skins are not colored like your own.
You declare before the world and are understood by the world to declare that you hold these truths to be self-evident and that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, quote, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, end quote. A seventh part of the inhabitants of your country. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth.
It is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it as if it were the sheet anchor of all of your hopes. Be warned. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever.
Vic and Vicky are our last two readers. Vic and Vicky. And then we will have remarks, for closing remarks from Mr. James Williams. Thank you.
But it is answered in reply to all this, that precisely what I have now denounced is, in fact, guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States, that the right to hold and to hunt slaves is a part of the Constitution framed by the illustrious fathers of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all that I have said before, your fathers, instead of being the honest men I have before declared them to be, were the veriest impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is the inevitable conclusion, and from it there is no escape. But I differ from those who charge this baseness on the framers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least so I believe. And others have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour.
Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relationship to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot around in the same old path of the fathers without interference. The time was when such could be done, but a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it, oh God, speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow. In every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return to evil good. Not blow for blow, that day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe.
I know you just clapped, but I want to have you join me in thanking our opening speaker for her excellent remarks and for these excellent readers that you just heard from. So let's clap again, please. I assured Mayor Foushee that my remarks would be brief, and I try to be a man of my word. But there are a few things I want to say. And one is, this is the 11th consecutive year that we've read this speech in Carrboro, and that's worth noting. That first year, Lydia Lavelle was mayor, and at that time, I was not aware of any other place that was doing a reading in North Carolina. I was aware of other places some places across the country, but in North Carolina, I wasn't aware of any other place that were doing readings of this most powerful and important speech. There has been some change in that. I will acknowledge that this morning at 10 o'clock a.m. At Stagville in Durham, there was such a reading. I think they've been doing it for maybe 3 or 4 years. And my friend and God's a Laughing House labor organizer extraordinaire in his organization and group, Fruits of Labor in Raleigh, also are doing communal readings today of this speech. And so I think it's an idea whose time has come, and we'll be hearing of more communities doing this. The other thing that I want to mention is, with Frederick Douglass and this speech and so many of his speeches and this concept of hope beginning and ending on hope. And thinking about where we are at this moment in our country's history. And, 5 years after Frederick Douglass gave this speech, there was the Dred Scott decision. The worst case in the annals of American history, which basically said that a black person, slave or free, there were no rights that white people were required to respect. We didn't have any rights. And so think about Frederick Douglass and the speech that he gave in response to and after Dred Scott. And I'm just going to read a paragraph or two. And one portion says, "Those who have undertaken to suppress and crush out this agitation for liberty and humanity have been most woefully disappointed. Many who have engaged to put it down have found themselves put down. The agitation has pursued them in all their meanderings, broken in upon their seclusion, and at the very moment of fancied security, it has settled down upon them like a mantle of unquenchable fire." In other words, he's saying that despite this case, the abolition movement still had power, and he had a belief that it was going to achieve its goals. And in another paragraph, he says, "Come what will, I hold it to be morally certain that sooner or later, by fair means or foul means, in quiet or in tumult, in peace or in blood, in judgment or in mercy, slavery is doomed to cease out of this otherwise goodly land, and liberty is destined to become the settled law of the Republic." And I encourage you to maintain the spirit of Douglass in this moment. We are aware of the horrible decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court last week, and there are a number of other things, but one can say clearly that, of course we know, in coming November, democracy is on the ballot, but democracy is on the brink when you have a Supreme Court decision basically saying that this former president is basically a king. And so we know that there are challenges, but let's, as another organizer and freedom fighter says, keep hope alive. If we keep doing the work, organizing, mobilizing, and as Frederick Douglass says, agitate, 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 we will overcome. My final comment is there's a voice that I want you to hear that I think speaks to this moment, and it inspires, and I think captures sort of the essence of what Douglass is saying also. So if you will take a few, 3 minutes or so and listen to Andra Day and Rise Up. And those will be the final words that you will hear from me. Well, not from me.
Living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find out fire. But I see it in you, so we go walking out. Ooh, mountain. We go walking out. Ooh, I'm dead. And I rise like the day. I rise
what a fitting way to, fitting and inspirational as we know we're gonna have to rise up for one another. I did want to recognize Councilmember Catherine Frey. I see her there, and also First Vice President of North Carolina Democratic Party, Mr. Jonah Garson, over in the corner. And take this home with you. Have a good afternoon.